Ever get that feeling like something's coming back around? Like you're seeing it everywhere you turn, like
Yeah.
it's haunting you almost.
Yeah, like a ghost from the past.
Exactly. Well, today we're diving into one of those things, the Y2K revival.
Oh, okay.
You know, those low-rise jeans you thought were gone for good?
Oh, yeah, I've noticed those are back.
Well, they're back all right, and they've brought friends. Like, all that pop punk is suddenly topping the charts again.
Oh,
And that whole, like, techno-optimistic vibe of the early 2000s is in the air again, but maybe with, like, a dash of digital anxiety too, you
yeah.
know?
Yeah, that makes sense.
To get to the bottom of this, we've got a whole stack of articles and insights to unpack.
Okay, cool.
From places like the Johns Hopkins newsletter, the Science Survey, the Fashion Globe,
Mm-hmm.
Official Philippines. Oh, and Vermeulen Designs blog has some great takes on the design side of it all.
Interesting.
And of course, we couldn't resist dipping our toes into the wild world of Reddit.
Of course. Always good for some perspectives.
Always.
Mm.
So yeah, that turn of the millennium energy, it's definitely back with a vengeance. What we're really trying to figure out today is, like, why now? And what does this whole Y2K comeback tell us about where we are, culturally?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, trends always cycle back around, but there's got to be something more to it, right?
Right. Like, there's got to be a reason why this is resonating so much.
Totally.
So let's plug in and tune our dials to the music scene for a sec. The Johns Hopkins newsletter makes this pretty compelling argument that there's a definite Y2K sound wave happening.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And they point to artists like Addison Rae, Tate McRae, Olivia Rodrigo, even Lady Gaga, all sort of tacking into that early 2000s energy in different ways.
That's interesting. So, like, how are they doing that? What makes it Y2K?
Well, take Addison Rae, for example.
Yeah.
She first blew up on TikTok, right?
Right.
And her early music was like finding its groove. But the newsletter calls out her AREP as a real turning point. And then when Diet Pepsi came out on Columbia Records, it was like, bam! You could hear those early Britney Spears vibes all over.
Oh, I see. Like that catchy, upbeat pop sound.
Exactly. Super infectious. And it even climbed to number 54 on the Billboard Hot 100.
Wow, so it's definitely connecting with people.
Big time. Now, with Tate McRae, her latest album, So Close to What, is being compared to get this Britney Spears in the zone.
Whoa, that's a big comparison.
Huge. But the newsletter highlights how McRae blends those super personal lyrics with beats that just make you want to dance. Like, Britney did that so well,
Right. Blending vulnerability with that dance floor energy.
Totally. And there's this one track, Nostalgia, that just nails that whole vibe.
Makes sense given the album title.
Mm-hmm.
So is this Y2K pop just a fad? Or is it here to stay?
Well, So Close to What debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200 and actually broke Spotify records for a female pop album debut in 2025. No joke. It seems like this Y2K sound isn't just a surface thing, it's really hitting a nerve with people.
Yeah, I guess so, if the numbers are that strong.
Oh, and we can't forget Olivia Rodrigo. She is channeling that early 2000s pop-punk angst like nobody's business. Her album Sour is full of it, that rebellious energy that bands like Paramore and Avril Lavigne just owned.
Okay, yeah, I can see that.
Like, songs like Good For You and Brutal have that raw guitar sound that just screams early 2000s.
I remember those days.
And even her style choices often have that cool, grungy edge.
Right, like a little bit messy, but on purpose.
Yeah, exactly. That's SOR. But then her follow-up album, GUTS, the newsletter makes this great point about how it takes that pop-punk heartbreak and expands it into a whole coming-of-age story.
Interesting. So it's not just about breakups anymore.
No, there's that same almost like bratty energy in songs like Bad Idea Right and Get 'Em Back that Avril Lavigne had on the Best Damn Thing.
Yeah.
But then you also get these really strong storytelling moments in songs like Logical and The Grudge, that kind of remind you of Fiona Apple or early Taylor Swift.
Yeah, I can see that.
And she hit #1 on Billboard again with GUTS.
Wow.
She's the first female artist in like almost a decade to have her first 2 albums debut at the top.
That's huge.
It really shows how much this sound is resonating. And then there's Lady Gaga. Her latest album, Mayhem, is being called this nostalgic reinvention.
Really?
Yeah. It blends her signature dance pop with this theatrical flair that takes you right back to her early hits like Poker Face.
Oh, interesting.
The lead single, Abracadabra, has that same catchy, almost hypnotic quality.
Yeah, I can see that.
And Garden of Eden mixes these really interesting, almost biblical images with this totally modern pop sensibility. The Times even praised the album's high energy and those those clear nods to her earlier work.
So it's like she's going back to her roots, but with a new perspective.
Exactly. She's constantly evolving, but somehow also staying connected to what made her so iconic in the first place.
That's impressive. It's not easy to do both.
Right. So it's not just our ears that are getting a blast from the past. It's our eyes, too.
What do you mean?
Fashion. The Johns Hopkins newsletter points out that all those iconic Y2K pieces are back. Low-rise jeans, crop tops, velour tracksuits, you name it.
Oh, yeah.
Butterfly clips, chunky sneakers, those tiny little handbags. They're not just in old photo albums anymore.
Right. I've seen people rocking those looks.
They're everywhere. And even the artists themselves are all over this trend. Like the Obsessed video by Addison Rae. The newsletter says it's like it was filmed in 2003 and just time traveled to us. All those baby tees and glossy lips.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I've seen that video. It's very early 2000s.
And then there's Tate McRae's X's video. People are even comparing it to Britney's Me Against the Music video.
Wow. High praise.
The newsletter argues that this isn't just nostalgia, though.
Yep.
It's a cultural reclamation of sorts, like recognizing that those Y2K trends weren't just like random tacky fads. They were a blueprint that this new generation is remixing.
That's an interesting way to look at it.
Ah,
So it's not just copying, it's evolving.
exactly. Now, the science survey gets really specific about what this Y2K aesthetic actually is. They call it retrofuturistic.
Retrofuturistic.
Yeah, it started popping up in the late 90s, early history, what some call the noughties.
Oh, right. The naughty.
And it's all about those super bright colors, shiny, almost plasticky materials, and really unique textures,
Right.
all inspired by things like cyberculture, rave culture, sci-fi movies like The Matrix, even music videos like TLC's No Scrubs.
So like a futuristic vibe, but with a retro twist.
Right. We're talking full leather outfits, super shiny tops, low-rise everything, futuristic accessories,
Wow. Yeah.
double denim, graphic tees, and oh, the whale tail.
Ah, classic.
And if you need proof that this is a full-blown revival, the science survey points out that back in 2021, Google searches for things like Y2K theme party, Y2K fashion, Y2K makeup, they all skyrocketed.
Oh, wow. So people were actively searching for it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And what's really fascinating is how Gen Z, particularly during the pandemic, started raiding their parents' closets and hitting up thrift stores to score genuine Y2K pieces.
Makes sense. Sustainable and unique.
It's like this whole era is being re-examined, and it's not just fashion and music either.
Really. What else is there?
Well, the science survey points to the whole hashtag Free Britney movement, the Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez reunion, even the Sex and the City reboot.
Huh. I hadn't thought of it that way. But yeah, I guess those are all kind of tied to that era.
They see it all as part of this larger Y2K wave.
Interesting. So maybe there's something about that time period that people are drawn to, maybe a sense of nostalgia or a desire for something simpler.
Yeah, maybe. But here's the thing. The science survey says it's not just a straight-up rerun. Gen Z is giving Y2K a modern makeover. They're taking the best parts and ditching some of the more problematic stuff that was happening back then.
Like what?
Well, things like the pressure to be super thin,
Oh.
some of the underlying misogyny of that era.
Right. We've come a long way since then, thankfully.
For sure. And they're being super conscious about making this revival more inclusive. You've got TikTok accounts like @LoveJessicaBlair and @LaVeganBaddie that are specifically promoting inclusivity within this whole Y2K aesthetic.
That's great. It's important to make sure everyone feels welcome and celebrated.
Couldn't agree more. And it's not just about bringing back old trends exactly as they were. The science survey mentions how Gen Z is mixing Y2K looks with 90s hip-hop and streetwear. Even some 2010s styles like alt and hipster.
That's cool. So it's all about blending and remixing different influences.
Totally. Like, picture this. An 80s windbreaker with a baby tee. Or a 70s halter top with those low-rise jeans.
Old.
Right. And the science survey quotes Asada Diallo, a student, who says this style is so versatile and lets people really personalize their look.
I like that. It's not about following rules. It's about finding your own unique expression.
Exactly. And the Fashion Globe really dives into some of the specific Y2K pieces making a comeback, like butterfly clips are back in a big way. Velour tracksuits and those low-rise jeans, all those are back.
Yeah, I've seen those.
They're everywhere. And the magazine makes this really interesting point. It's not just about bringing back these trends, it's about reinterpreting them. Like, how can we express ourselves through these looks now, blending that retro vibe with futuristic touches?
I like that. So it's not just a costume party. It's a way to explore your personal style.
It's like taking inspiration from the past but making it your own. They quote Elizabeth Kosich, who talks about how the original Y2K era, inspired by shows like Friends, had this really playful, lighthearted energy.
Oh yeah, Friends. That was definitely a big influence back then.
And the Fashion Globe even lists some of the updated styles we're seeing. Cargo pants with actual pockets this time.
Uh-huh, finally. Functional fashion.
Right. Layered skirts, chunky sneakers.
And the accessories have gotten an upgrade too. Holographic handbags, neon colors, even tech-inspired clothing. Wow, so they're taking those classic Y2K elements and giving them a modern twist.
It's like Y2K 2.0. And they quote Josh Neumann, who says that this Y2K revival offers a really comforting and fun sense of escapism.
I can see that. It's like stepping back in time to a simpler era.
Totally. But what's really interesting is what the Fashion Globe says about technology. They point out that the original Y2K era had this really optimistic view of tech.
Oh yeah, before we were all glued to our phones 24/7.
Exactly. Like before we knew about the downsides of social media and all that. So those Matrix-inspired metallic looks and sleek styles, they hit different now that we're living in such a digitally saturated world.
It's true. It's like the meaning of those styles has shifted.
The magazine quotes Bruno Cialelli, who says that Y2K's refusal to be boring is this much-needed energy in 2025.
It's like a reminder to have fun and not take things too seriously.
Totally. And another really important point from the Fashion Globe is the emphasis on sustainability in this revival. They mentioned that a whopping 70% of Gen Z prefer buying secondhand Y2K pieces. And there's a growing demand for eco-friendly versions of these styles.
That's great to hear. It's important to be mindful of the environmental impact of fashion.
Absolutely. And the Fashion Globe even gives some tips on how to rock the Y2K look in 2025. Like, start small with just a few statement pieces. Mix vintage finds with your everyday modern basics.
Good advice.
Experiment with bold accessories. They even suggest colored contacts.
Whoa, okay. That's a commitment.
Haha, right. And don't be afraid to mix high-end with low-end pieces, like maybe pair some vintage juicy couture with something minimalist.
Interesting. I'll have to try that.
But beyond what we're wearing and listening to, there's got to be a deeper reason why we're gravitating towards Y2K right now, right?
Yeah, I agree. There's something else going on here.
Well, the Johns Hopkins newsletter argues that a big part of it is escapism.
Escape it.
Yeah. The early 2000s represent this time before social media really took over our lives.
Right, when life felt a bit simpler, maybe.
Totally. The way we consumed pop culture was so different. Like, remember TRL going to the mall to buy magazines, burning CDs?
Oh yeah, I remember doing all of that.
There wasn't this constant pressure of algorithms telling you what to like, no chasing viral moments, no doom scrolling for hours.
That's a good point. It was a different kind of media landscape.
The newsletter highlights the appeal of the pop star mystique back then, the tabloid drama, that kind of maximalist self-expression, things that Gen Z might not have experienced firsthand, but that they're kind of craving now.
Yeah, I get that. It's like this romanticized version of the past, you know?
Maybe it's a longing for a time that felt less performative, where you weren't constantly worried about how everything you did or said might end up online.
It's interesting to think about how our relationship with technology has changed over the years, and how that might be fueling this nostalgia for a pre-social media era.
Yeah, and the science survey echoes this idea of escapism. They suggest that Gen Z finds comfort in this nostalgia for a simpler time, even if they don't actually remember it firsthand. Growing up with social media, the pandemic, climate change, they've got a lot on their plates. And maybe Y2K offers this kind of comforting escape.
Right, like a retreat to a time that feels less stressful and overwhelming.
Exactly. But also, the 2000s, they weren't all sunshine and roses, right? Like, there was 9/11, the rise of the iPod, then the iPhone. The world was changing really fast. It wasn't all just low-rise jeans and Britney Spears.
Yeah, that's true. It was a period of both progress and upheaval. And it's interesting how those cultural shifts get reflected in design trends, too.
Right, and Vermeulen Design's blog really helps unpack all of that. Like, they point out that the term Y2K aesthetic originally referred to this very specific retro-futuristic art movement.
Okay.
It was all about metallic chrome textures, that kind of techno-utopian vision of the future. And then there were these like bubbly, abstract shapes they called blobjects, even clothing made with reflective materials.
Interesting. So like futuristic, but also a little bit playful.
Exactly. But now, Y2K aesthetic is also used more broadly to describe the fashion of the 2000s. Sometimes they use the term cybercore to talk specifically about those clothing trends.
Okay, so the meaning has expanded over time.
Right. Now, Vermeulen design also points out some key features of that original Y2K design movement. Like those metallic and chrome textures really spoke to the optimism around technology back then. And then there was the bold typography, often pixelated fonts, stretched out sans serifs. It all had a very futuristic feel.
I can see that. It's like they were trying to visually capture the excitement and potential of the digital age.
Yeah. But what's really cool is that in contemporary design, it's not just a straight copy-paste of those elements.
Oh, so how are they using it now?
Vermeulen design explains how designers are finding this balance between that Y2K boldness and modern usability. So you might see retro typography paired with cleaner layouts, metallic accents used more sparingly, those abstract shapes incorporated more thoughtfully.
It's like taking inspiration from the past, but refining it for a modern audience.
And we're seeing some really cool examples of this Y2K revival in design across different industries. Vermeulen design highlights Apple's macOS Big Sur.
Mm-hmm.
It's got those vibrant color gradients and rounded icons. They see it as a really sleek, updated take on skeuomorphism.
What's skeuomorphism? Sorry, I'm not familiar with that term.
Oh, it's basically when digital interfaces mimic real-world objects. Like, think of those early calendar apps that look like a physical calendar.
Oh, right. Okay, that makes sense.
So Big Sur is kind of like that, but more modern and streamlined. And in fashion, brands like Balenciaga and Marc Jacobs have been using those neon visuals and metallic elements in their ad campaigns.
Oh,
And in the music industry, artists like Charli XCX and Dua Lipa are using neon colors, bold typography, and retro-futuristic visuals in their album art and music videos.
so it's really making its way into all aspects of pop culture.
Totally. Vermeulen design even predicts this neo-Y2K trend that's going to combine that bold Y2K energy with a more modern sense of simplicity.
Oh, interesting. What's that going to look like?
Well, they think we'll keep seeing gradients, 3D textures, and tech-inspired motifs, but with a cleaner, more refined overall aesthetic.
I can see that. It's like taking the best of both worlds.
Yeah. Now, speaking of trends, there's another one you might have noticed that has some things in common with Y2K. Dopamine dressing.
Oh, yeah. All those bright colors.
Exactly. According to Gulia's blog, both Y2K and dopamine dressing love those highly saturated hues.
Makes sense. They both have that eye-catching, vibrant quality.
Right. But Gulia also points out some key differences. Like Y2K has this strong connection to technology, heavy metal, cyberpunk aesthetics, whereas dopamine dressing is more about that feeling of happiness and joy that comes from wearing bright colors. It's meant to feel more relaxed and uplifting.
Okay, so there's a different kind of energy to each trend.
Totally. Golia even suggests that while dopamine dressing is seen as more conventionally lovely, Y2K has a cooler, more mature edge.
Oh, I can see that.
They also make this interesting observation that while Y2K was huge with middle schoolers back in the day, you don't really picture a little kid wearing it now, whereas dopamine dressing feels more universally appealing.
Yeah, that's true. Dopamine dressing doesn't really have an age limit.
And another difference is the accessories. Y2K was all about those exaggerated accessories. Big black frame glasses, colorful wigs, heavy makeup.
Right.
Whereas dopamine dressing focuses more on the impact of the clothing color itself.
So it's a more minimalist approach to accessorizing.
Pretty much. Now, lifted some perspective from people who actually lived through the original Y2K era.
Good idea. What better way to understand the trend than to hear from those who experienced it firsthand?
We took a look at this Reddit thread on Xennials.
Oh, Zennials. That's the microgeneration between Gen X and Millennials, right?
Exactly, and they had some really interesting thoughts about seeing all these Y2K trends coming back around. Some are actually pretty happy to see skinny jeans go.
Uh-huh. Yeah, those were a love it or hate it trend.
And they're loving the return of looser, more comfortable styles like baggy and cargo pants, especially ones with actual pockets.
Functional fashion is making a comeback.
There's definitely a lot of love for that comfy, practical style on that thread. And a lot of people are talking about how fashion tends to cycle back around every 30 years or so.
Yeah, that makes sense. What's old is new again.
Plus, thrift stores have a huge influence on what comes back in style.
Right. Thrifting is so popular now.
So what's available in those stores often gets a new wave of attention. But there's also this really interesting generational dynamic that comes up in the thread.
Oh, like what?
Some Zennials notice how Gen Z will critique older generations, but then turn around and adopt their fashion. And they see Zennials as this kind of relatable, cool, but mysterious generation.
Uh-huh, I love that. Cool but mysterious.
Right. And there's a lot of talk about Gen Z identifying as Zoomers and sometimes like labeling and even being a bit critical of even younger generations like Gen Alpha.
Interesting. I guess every generation has its own way of defining itself and relating to the generations that came before and after.
Yeah, and they often use the term iPad kids to describe Gen Alpha because of their early and often unsupervised exposure to screens.
Yeah, it's a different world growing up with technology so readily available.
Some Reddit users also feel like there's a lot of pressure within Gen Z to fit in and not stand out too much. They speculate that it might be tied to like the constant online scrutiny they face.
It's hard to escape that feeling of being watched and judged when you're online all the time.
So true. Now, for some Zennials, seeing these Y2K trends pop up in stores brings back a wave of nostalgia. But they also recognize that it's not exactly the same as it was back then.
Like it's a reinterpretation, not a carbon copy.
Right. Like they're not seeing as many ultra low-rise jeans, which some are totally relieved about.
Uh-huh. Yeah, some trends are better left in the past.
There's this funny story in the thread about someone seeing a Gen Z person wearing a hoodie with the Windows XP Bliss wallpaper on it.
What? Really?
And it started this whole debate about whether it was an inside joke or just a reference to something that doesn't really have fans in the traditional sense.
That's hilarious. It's like a cultural artifact that's been repurposed.
Yeah, and it really highlights how differently generations interpret and connect with those kinds of things. And then, of course, some people just straight up think early 2000s fashion was the worst.
Uh-huh. Fair enough. It wasn't all hits, that's for sure.
But some users point out that what's being called Y2K now, like those baggy jeans, actually started gaining popularity back in the 90s. So there's some debate about what even counts as Y2K fashion.
Right, it can be blurry. The lines between decades are never perfectly neat.
But a lot of people are just happy to see comfier, looser styles come back, especially those who never really got on board with the skinny jean trend.
Comfort is key.
And for some Zennials, seeing this Y2K revival is this surreal moment of realizing they're old enough to recycle a trend.
Uh-huh.
But they still feel like those awkward teenagers on the inside.
I think we all feel that way sometimes.
One person even shared that their son got Y2K clothes for his Roblox avatar. It's everywhere.
Wow, the trend has even infiltrated the digital world.
And someone else mentioned hearing Korn's Freak on a Leash on an oldie station. Talk about a reality check.
Oof. That's a sign you're getting old.
But the funniest part is that some of these younger people rocking Y2K styles might not even realize it's a returning trend.
Uh-huh. It's just fashion to them.
Yeah, it's just what's cool now. Now, get ready for another trip down memory lane because we're diving into the early days of the internet.
Okay, let's fire up the Wayback Machine.
This Reddit thread really paints a picture of how different it was online in the late 90s and early 2000s compared to today. Like, people describe it as being so much more mellow and decentralized back then.
Right, before the big tech companies took over.
Before everything became so centralized and algorithm-driven, they talk about this Cambrian explosion around 2003, 2004 when everything changed.
Oh, and a lot of people point to MySpace as being a big part of that shift.
Totally. It really changed the way the internet worked and felt. But for kids growing up in the early 2000s, the internet experience was often much simpler.
Okay, yeah, I can see that.
It was all about those child-focused game websites like PBS Kids, Nickelodeon, Disney. And those sites often didn't have things like CAPTCHAs, personalized ads, or comment sections.
Oh, wow, that's so different from today. It's hard to imagine a website without those things now.
Right. But for teenagers and adults, chaperones were huge. And those often didn't have the kind of child safety features that we expect now.
Yeah, that was definitely a different time in terms of online safety.
And there's a lot of nostalgia for those hyper-specific websites made by some random person.
Oh,
They're like
yeah.
just weird, niche little corners of the internet. It's a stark contrast to today's internet, which is dominated by those massive corporate platforms.
I get that. There was something kind of charming about the early internet, you know?
It was like the Wild West. And you can't talk about the early internet without mentioning file-sharing services like LimeWire.
Oh, yeah, LimeWire. I remember spending hours searching for songs on there.
Uh-huh. And the constant fear of downloading a virus. Although some people on Reddit pointed out that if you had a bit of common sense, you could usually avoid the worst of it.
Right, you had to be careful. It was a different kind of digital literacy.
And what's interesting is how much emphasis there is on the anonymity of the early internet. Like, you could be whoever you wanted online, so different from Gen Z, where everything is so public and documented.
It's true. There's a lot less privacy online now. But it's important to remember that the early internet also had a dark side.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like some people in the Reddit thread talked about the amount of aggressively sexist and racist content that was just openly accessible back then.
Yeah, the internet wasn't always a very welcoming place.
They even mentioned specific subreddits that would be immediately banned today.
Times have definitely changed. And early YouTube was this totally different beast. It was basically a haven for funny home videos. Nothing like the polished, informative content we see now.
Yeah, YouTube's become so much more professionalized over the years.
But there was a certain magic in finding those random gems of pop culture history online.
It's like going down a rabbit hole of internet history.
And website design was a whole other story.
Yeah.
Like, so many sites were just incredibly user-unfriendly, random font colors everywhere, and you often needed to know HTML just to build a basic website.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I remember those days.
Yeah.
It was the era of blinking text and animated GIFs.
And those chat rooms with the stranger danger vibes, everyone asking ASL.
Oh yeah, that brings back memories.
Not always good ones. But for a lot of people, the sound of dial-up internet connecting and that AOL startup sound are like instant nostalgia triggers.
Uh-huh, those sounds take me back.
And the whole concept of the family computer where there was zero online privacy is so foreign to how we use tech now.
It's true. We're also connected to our own individual devices now. Back then, the internet was primarily for entertainment.
Right, like people use Napster to share music and game FAQs to create super detailed, user-generated strategy guides for video games.
Oh yeah, Game IQs was a lifesaver back then.
And AOL Instant Messenger was basically the main form of social media. People used it for chatting, sharing music, everything.
And then came MySpace, which was a huge deal for music promotion.
It's huge. It created this really communal space for bands to connect with their fans, which feels so different from today's more individualized social media landscape.
Yeah, there was a real sense of community on MySpace.
And niche interests felt so much more special before everything became so mainstream and accessible. So as we wrap up our deep dive into the Y2K revival, it's clear that it's this really complex phenomenon.
Yeah, there's a lot more to it than meets the eye.
It's not just about catchy songs or flashy clothes. It touches on music, fashion, design, our memories of the early internet. And it's forcing us to think about how those things intersect and influence each other.
It's like a cultural time capsule that's been opened up, and we're sifting through all the pieces trying to make sense of it.
But what's really important to remember is that this isn't just a carbon copy of the past. It's being reinterpreted through the lens of our current values.
Right, with a greater emphasis on things like inclusivity and sustainability.
And that brings us to a final thought for you to ponder. How does our current digital world, which is so vastly different from the early 2000s, both fuel and reshape our nostalgia for that era? What aspects of our world today?